And we're going to go over how to solve equations with variables on both sides. Right now at the top of the note page that is on your Canvas account that you hopefully have open, I want you to go ahead and pause the camera for the video for a moment and attempt our two warm-up questions, which is a review of multi-step equations. So hopefully you paused the video and you attempted these two problems on your own. We're going to go through them right now to make sure that we understand the process. We have x minus 2 over 3 equals 4. All right, we have to remember that a fraction bar is division. So I want to do the inverse of division. All right, inverse is a fancy word for opposite. Okay, so the opposite of division is multiplication. All right, we know we have to balance our equations. So what I do to one side of the equal sign, I must do to the other. All right, these 3's cancel each other out. That's our entire purpose of inverse operations. So I am left with x minus 2 is equal to 12. 4 times 3 gives me 12. All right, we know that we're trying to get our x by itself. Currently, we still have a number on the same side of the equal sign. We have a constant with that x, so we need to move it. We look at the sign in front of that 2. It's currently minus, so the opposite, the inverse, is adding 2. Now these 2's have canceled out, all right, which has x all by itself. Our goal, we're good. And we do 12 plus 2 to get 14. All right, that means x equals 14 is our final answer. And if we checked it in our original equation, 14 minus 2 is 12, divided by 3 is in fact 4. So we know we did it correctly. All right, number 2. We need to move our constants first. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the inverse of subtracting 3. We're going to go and add 3. So I end up with 2x equals 18 because we know these 3's have canceled each other out. All right, that x still is not by itself, so we look at what we need to move. We need to move the 2. All right, well, 2 next to a variable, any leading coefficient next to a variable, is multiplication. So our inverse is division. And we are left with x is equal to 9. All right, so what you notice in these problems so far is that the variables are always on the same side of the equal sign. In this case, our two warm-ups, we only had one variable. So it says when we have variables on both sides of the equal signs, it adds one step. All right, what we need to understand is we have to move those variables to one side of the equal sign with inverse operations. All right, it is not like combining terms when they are on the same side of the equal sign. Right, if the variables are on both sides of the equal sign, we use inverse operations to move variables to one side. All right, so again, I want you to understand, anytime we cross that equal sign, we're going to be using inverse operations, okay? We are not combining like terms. So in this little box, we need to talk about something. We need to pay attention to signs, because depending on which way we move the variable, we can make our life easier and work with a positive variable, all right? You hear me constantly in class say we want to work smarter, not harder. All right, a lot of us do not like to work with negative numbers. So we want to do everything in our power to keep our variables positive. So if we look at this, we have 2x plus 13 equals negative 8. All right, again, we're crossing that equal sign, so we're using inverse operations. I could either take the 2x and move it to the right side, or I could take the 8x and move it to the left side. Both ways are going to get you to the same final answer, but one is going to keep my variable positive. If I take the 2x and shift it to the other side, so 2x is currently a positive, there's a plus sign in front of it that we're too lazy to write. We want to subtract 2x from each side. That leaves me with canceling out those x terms. 13 is equal to 8x minus 2x is 6x. And we still have that 5 hanging out. All right, so again, constants on one side, variables on the other. I'm going to move this constant by adding 5 to each side. All right, 13 plus 5, I'm going to scooch up here because I don't have enough room, is equal to 18. And we still have 6x. All right, my variable is still not all by itself. All right, I got a number next to a variable. That means my last step is to divide by 6, which means x is equal to 3. All right, if you had chosen to go the opposite direction, all right, so I'm going to rewrite the problem, and I'm doing it in a different color. So 2x plus 13 equals 8x minus 5. All right, say I wanted to move my variables to the left, because that's where we usually see them a lot and we start to develop habits. I would subtract 8x from each side. All right, 2x minus 8x is going to leave you with negative 6x. Plus 13 equals negative 5. All right. At this point, I subtract 13 from each side. We have negative 6x equals negative 18. And we know when we divide two negatives, it becomes a positive. So I still get the same exact answer of x equals 3, but we dealt with negatives a lot. And negatives are not always our strong point, so we want to avoid them if we can. Both will get you to the same final answer, and both are acceptable methods. So we have two examples that we're going to do together. Again, I do recommend pausing and trying them on your own. All right, so now we're going to go over them. With this, again, we want to shift our variables to one side in this problem. So if I shift the 9, the bigger number, over to the other side, it's definitely going to give me a negative. So I'm going to move the 4x. That's a really crooked line. So I subtract 4x from each side because currently 4x is a positive, so there is a positive sign in front there that we just never write. 9x minus 4x is going to tell you 5x. We still need to bring down all the other stuff we haven't dealt with. Big thing to pay attention to, don't go losing that negative. All right, negative and minus are the same thing. So since this is minus 18 up here, you need to write it as a negative 18 down here. Now we move our constants. So I've got to move this 2 away from the variable. It's currently a plus 2, so my opposite would be minus 2. So 5x, the 2's have gone bye-byes. All right, I have negative 18 minus 2. That gives me negative 20. All right, remember when we have the same signs, all right, negatives or positives, you add them up and you keep the sign. So 18 plus 2 is 20. We keep the negative. Okay, now I have one last step. This right here is multiplication, so my inverse is division. And x is going to be negative 4. Remember, we can always plug this in and check our work. So in this problem, when I plug it in and I solve this side and get my number, and I solve this side and get my number, they should come out to be equal to each other if I did it correctly. All right, let's do our last practice problem. This one probably looks a bit scarier because we have some distribution and combining like terms all mixed into one. So the first thing we got to deal with is distribution. Make sure we pay attention to our signs when we distribute. So negative 2 times y. Remember, there's a leading coefficient of 1 here. So you're doing negative 2 times 1 is negative 2y. Negative 2 times 6, a positive times a negative is a negative. 2 times 6 is 12. And then I'm just going to write out the other side. Some of you may combine right here, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm going to break it into 2 steps for some of us that need it that way. Now you notice over here I have like terms. I have a y and I have a 2y. So again, anytime I have a plain old variable without a leading coefficient, you have to remember that there's a 1 there. I have 1y written down. We don't write the 1 because it's not necessary. It's assumed, so we don't usually waste our time writing it. So if I do 1 plus 2, that means I have 3y on this side. So again, I want to keep my y's positive if possible. So I'm going to shift this 2 on over. It's minus, so I'm going to add. This cancels out. Negative 12 is coming down. 3y plus 2y is 5y. And this plus 3 is still there. Now I need to scoot that constant away. All right, I need to get rid of 3. So I'm going to subtract 3 from each side. Negative 12 minus 3. Remember, it's adding and keeping the negative sign. So 12 plus 3 is 15. And I keep that negative sign. Equals 5y. A number next to a variable is multiplication, so the inverse is division. And I get y is equal to negative 3. So that is variables on both sides. All right, make sure if you have questions, you write them down. So when we go over this in class tomorrow, we will be able to answer any questions that you have. You need to submit these notes on your Google Drive that you have shared with your teacher. And then the practice problems, which are in a separate PDF, need to be uploaded to Canvas by midnight for your homework assignment. All right, send us an email if you have any questions.